Welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett and we'll start with the headlines. The UK government defends its controversial policy to send asylum seekers to Rwanda as the senior leadership of the Church of England brands it shameful and immoral. Elon Musk will speak to Twitter employees this week for the first time at a company-wide meeting since launching his $44 billion bid for it in April. Russian and Ukrainian forces are fighting street-to-street battles for control of the key industrial city of Severodonetsk as Kyiv makes an impassioned plea to Western allies to speed up arms deliveries. Thailand legalizes the growing of marijuana and its consumption in food and drinks, becoming the first Asian country to do so. A US court charges Britney Spears' ex-husband with a felony count of stalking after he attempted to gatecrash her wedding in Southern California. The UK's controversial plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda looks set to take off later. This after the Court of Appeal in London refused to grant an injunction to block Britain from sending its first flight. We've also just had a decision in support of the government's position from the Supreme Court as well. More on that in a second. It's not clear exactly how many passengers will be flown to Rwanda today as part of a deal with the African country. These are migrants who the UK says arrived illegally in the country, crossing often the English Channel in small boats from Europe. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says people who avoid this first flight due to legal challenges will be put on a later one. The British government says the new policy will undermine people smuggling networks and stem the flow of migrants.
I can't put a figure on that, but what we have to look at is the cost of illegal immigration, the cost to the United Kingdom, the cost to the individuals and their families who are suffering from the actions of these people traffickers. That's the issue that we are seeking to deal with by putting in place this route to Rwanda. And it's very important we get that route going. We show that people trafficking doesn't work, and we're able to reduce the costs over time of illegal immigration into the United Kingdom.
This is about making sure that we break the business model of criminal gangs who are not only risking people's lives, but undermining public confidence in legal migration. We want to stop the illegal migrants from coming in, and we want to deter the criminal gangs, because they're not only endangering their lives, they're ripping them off.
Well, the plan's been criticised from several directions, including the United Nations Refugee Agency.
On Rwanda, I think we've been so clear over the last few weeks that we believe that this is all wrong. This is all wrong, this deal, for so many different reasons.
Well, last week it was reported that Prince Charles is also speaking out privately against the deportation plan. It's claimed that he has spoken of finding the policy appalling. Protesters have gathered outside the Home Office to express their anger at the scheme.
And then We are one world, one people, and we need to look after all the peoples of the world, yes, with the resources that we have to be able to do that.
We have to say no to the hostile environment. We have to say no to this cruelty.
The first flight is due to take off for Kigali this evening, local time. The policy is intended to deter migrants from crossing the English Channel from France in small boats. Over 10,000 people have crossed the Channel to reach the UK so far this year. Last year, more than 28,000 people made that crossing. Boris Johnson says criminal gangs are selling migrants false hopes, and his plan is to break their business model. Well, let's get more from UK correspondent Giles Gibson now, who's joining me now. Giles, it does look like this flight is going to take off with just a handful of people on board. How does the government justify that?
Yeah, Ollie, some breaking news just coming in the last few minutes. We've been hearing that the Supreme Court here in the UK is not going to hear an appeal that was made against a ruling that was made in the High Court. So that is one of the legal barriers really cleared, allowing this flight to take off in the coming hours. As you say, it is very difficult to really get an exact sense, an exact number of how many asylum seekers are going to be on this flight, but we are hearing reports that it is already declining below 10, so we're already into the single figures in terms of the number of people who are going to be on this flight, and there are also several legal challenges against individual cases, individual asylum seekers, so we could see that number decline even further in the hours before this flight actually takes off. According to the reports we're getting, this is costing the taxpayer, this charter flight that the UK government has arranged, around £500,000. So that's around about 600,000 US dollars. Doing the rounds on the morning shows, the morning TV and radio shows over the last few hours, the UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has been saying that this is still value for money. She's arguing that this first flight is going to be symbolic. It's going to be, a deterrent against any sort of asylum seekers and the criminal gangs who assist them to get across the English Channel from France. She's also been arguing that there are going to be significant numbers of asylum seekers in future flights later on in the year, but she wouldn't really commit to any sort of numbers, any sort of target that. And we've also been hearing this sort of tough talk from Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, saying that they are not going to be deterred here, despite, as you were just saying, all of that criticism, all of that opposition that there is in the UK to the launch of this policy.
OK, well, that's the position of the UK government. What is in it for Rwanda?
Well, first up, there is a financial benefit for the government of Rwanda because the UK government, to set up this scheme, has paid upfront around 150 million US dollars. And of course, if the scheme takes off, if it continues into several years, then the Rwandan government can then expect further payments from the UK government. The Rwandans are also negotiating, we understand, to do a similar sort of deal with the Danish government. So this UK deal could be the start of sort of multiple deals that Rwanda does with governments in Europe to take on flights of asylum seekers over the coming years. Paul Kagame, who is the president of Rwanda, has defended this policy throughout. He said, we don't buy and sell people, defending his government and himself against accusations that this is, a violation of these asylum seekers' human rights. But clearly there is another side of this coin, because while the Rwandan government is getting these payments, they are also, as a result of this scheme, just getting a lot more scrutiny on their government and particularly on their human rights record. There are accusations that political opponents of Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, have been killed in recent years. That is an accusation that the Kagame government has repeatedly denied, but clearly the longer that this sort of scheme goes on, the more schemes that are potentially announced with other governments, then the government in Kigali is just going to get more and more scrutiny from the international press as a result.
Thanks, Giles. Staying with the UK, the Boris Johnson administration has released its plans to get rid of parts of the post-Brexit deal. The UK wants to change the Northern Ireland Protocol to make the movement of goods easier between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. The UK's decision has annoyed the EU, which says London's plans to alter the 2020 signed deal will be in violation of international law. The UK says there's no reason for the EU to take legal action over the plan.
It doesn't make the EU any worse off. It protects the EU single market at the same time as fixing these problems in Northern Ireland. So we are working on a practical solution that works for everybody. Yes, we want to persuade the EU to negotiate with us to change the protocol to achieve that, but we cannot allow this situation in Northern Ireland to drift. That is where we are now, which is what I'm focused on, having responsibility for the protocol.
Well, the EU is saying it won't renegotiate the protocol.
Renegotiating of the protocol is unrealistic. No workable alternative solution has been found to this delicate, long-negotiated balance. Any renegotiations would simply bring further legal uncertainty for the people and businesses in Northern Ireland. For these reasons, the European Union will not renegotiate the protocol.
Arrangements for Northern Ireland, the only part of the UK that shares a land border with a European Union nation, have proved the thorniest issue in Britain's divorce from the bloc. The protocol was designed to regulate trade between Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland, part of the bloc's single market. Meanwhile, the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland has said that it will only move to restore Northern Ireland's regional power-sharing government if it's sure that the UK's proposals will become law. The party's been blocking the restoration of power sharing after elections last month, saying it won't take part until the protocol is changed. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says he regrets the UK's proposed changes to the protocol and has promised a unified EU response.
It's a very regrettable decision the British government took here. It's a departure from all the agreements we made between the European Union and Great Britain. It is also unjustified because the European Commission made many pragmatic proposals on how to achieve a good coexistence as part of the agreement we reached, to ensure a good transfer of goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, while at the same time including Northern Ireland in the European Union, which is a special privilege.
Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin has also warned Britain against its unilateral breach of the agreement with the EU. The United States says the changes will not affect the chances of a trade deal with the UK, but it's urging more negotiations with the EU.
The U.S. priority remains protecting the gains of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and preserving peace, stability, and prosperity for the people of Northern Ireland. We have welcomed the provisions in the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement and the Northern Ireland Protocol as a way to manage the practical challenges of preserving distinct EU and UK markets while preventing the return of customs infrastructure on the land border. We recognize there have been challenges over the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. We urge the UK and the EU to return to talks to resolve these differences.
Brazilian police and indigenous search teams have dismissed reports that they had found the bodies of a British reporter and a Brazilian indigenous expert missing in the Amazon. But President Jair Bolsonaro said that human remains were found during search operations, leading to confusion over the incident.
As buscas continuam. Agora, os indícios levam a crer que fizeram alguma maldade com eles, porque já foi encontrado boiando no rio vísceras humanas, que já estão aqui em Brasília para fazer o DNA, e pelo prazo, pelo tempo, já temos hoje 8 dias, indo para o 9º dia.
Indigenous groups in Brazil are demanding justice for the missing men.
More than 100 members of an indigenous union in the Brazilian Amazon hit the streets on Monday. Their demand, justice for missing indigenous expert Bruno Pereira and British journalist Dom Phillips.
As our leader Cora Kanamari just said, we are all Bruno Pereira and Dom Phillips.
Police and indigenous search teams dismissed earlier reports that bodies had been found. The pair were on a reporting trip and were last seen in the remote jungle area near Brazil's border with Peru and Colombia on June 5th. On Monday, the Guardian newspaper said a Brazilian diplomat told Phillips's brother-in-law that authorities were trying to identify two bodies tied to a tree. That development was not corroborated by Brazilian authorities or searchers. It comes after authorities said they recovered the pair's belongings in a creek on Sunday.
Relatives say that his backpack contains his computer, all his belongings, socks, shirts, shorts, their work tools such as their laptops.
News of the pair's disappearance has reverberated globally, with human rights organizations, environmentalists, and free press advocates urging Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro to step up the search. The area is home to the world's largest number of uncontacted indigenous people, but also gangs and illegal logging, mining, and hunting.
Moving on to the war in Ukraine, and Russian forces have cut off Severodonetsk after destroying the city's 3 connecting bridges. This after Ukraine said its forces had been pushed back from the centre of the eastern city, where fighting with Russia has been raging for weeks. Officials say more than 500 people are now trapped in the city after the bridges were destroyed. That also means there's no route in to deliver humanitarian assistance to the city. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky has again urged the West to supply more weapons to fight Russian troops in the Donbas region. Ukraine's president says the human toll of the war is terrifying and that the battle will go down in Europe's history.
In the battles in Donbas, and they will surely go down in military history as one of the most brutal battles in Europe, and for Europe, Ukrainian army and our intelligence tactically still beat the Russian military.
The UK's Defence Ministry says Russia is continuing its attack on the Kharkiv region in Ukraine. It says Moscow has made small advances there for the first time in weeks. Well, as the war continues, some Ukrainians are turning to humour as one way of dealing with the horrors of the conflict.
It's been more than 100 days. The Ukraine war rages on. These months of sorrow have taken a toll on the mental health of Ukrainians. While most people are struggling for a livelihood, it is impossible to think of therapy and the money to afford it. To tackle the situation, Ukrainians have found a unique way. Those away from the front line are using jokes and humour as weapons. Weapons against wartime anxiety and moroseness. Weapons against Russia and to feel as one. They are laughing and crying together in their sorrow and anger. They are doing so by organising a stand-up comedy club.
This is the only way. This is the only way to save your mental health in war, as I suppose, because I don't have money for a psychotherapist, and a lot of Ukrainians don't have money for psychotherapists. And stand-up is a very cheap psychotherapy. You just give like $8 or $10. That's the price of the ticket, and you laugh in like an hour. That helps, I suppose. So yeah, it's totally good to laugh at war.
Comedians perform at the weekend in a basement comedy club in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev.
None of comedians use old material for now, like everybody write new stuff about war, about new experience. But now I start to feel that people a little bit tired about jokes about war, so they need something else, and now people react not so bright about jokes about war, because we joke all the time about that. So people are a little bit tired about the same themes all the time, because Russians are stupid, as it's not like a new idea.
While Russian President Vladimir Putin and his troops are favorite targets of dark Ukrainian wartime humor, this comedy club has its boundaries. The Ukrainian dead are not laughed about. The siege of Mariupol and the port city's Azovstal steelworks are far too raw for jokes. The same is true for atrocities in Bucha and elsewhere. The war in Ukraine isn't remotely funny, but Ukrainians are learning to laugh about it.
Thanks to them, we actually can gather together and, experience and enjoy it together as well. So it's really nice, and I bet it's really hard for them, of course, like even write down those jokes, but it helps everyone, so it's really cool.
The spirit of Ukrainians is not only a reminder that mental health is important, but it is also a great example on how, if things don't get easier, you just make them easier. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Israel's Foreign Minister Yair Lapid has made claims of an Iranian threat to make attempts to kill or abduct Israelis on holiday in Turkey. Lapid has urged Israeli citizens in Istanbul to leave as soon as possible. Israel's raised its Istanbul travel advisory to the highest level. Israel's foreign minister said that Israelis in Turkey face a real and immediate danger from Iranian agents. He cited several claimed Iranian attempts at carrying out terror attacks against Israelis on holiday in Turkey. Lapid said a huge effort by Israel's security forces had saved Israeli lives in recent weeks. He did not give further details. It's reported Turkey has arrested several suspected operatives of Iran's Revolutionary Guards.
Following recent weeks' events in Turkey and after a series of Iranian attempted terror attacks against Israelis on vacation in Istanbul, we are calling on Israelis not to fly to Istanbul. And if you don't have a vital reason, don't fly to Turkey. If you're already in Istanbul, return to Israel as soon as possible. I want to send a message to Iran. Those who harm Israelis will not be acquitted. Israelis' long arm will reach them, no matter where they are.
Our correspondent Jodie Cohen has sent us this report from Ra'anana with the latest.
Israel's National Security Council has raised the security alert in Istanbul to its highest level and the second highest level for other areas in the country. They say this follows intelligence showing a continuing imminent threat from Iran to Israeli tourists. Foreign Minister Lapid has advised Israelis to cancel their holidays to Turkey, saying that no vacation is worth risking your lives for. And Israel has thanked Turkey for the impressive security cooperation. In the past, Iran has threatened high-profile Israeli figures, reportedly, but the threat against tourists is being seen as something new. This comes amid increasing tensions with Iran, as it has reportedly further breached the nuclear agreement, and current nuclear talks are stalled. Iran says its actions are reversible, while Bennett has warned that Iran is dangerously close to producing nuclear weapons. This is Jodie Cohen for WION World is One.
Disney's Toy Story spin-off Lightyear has had its release halted by several countries. It's over the movie's depiction of a same-sex couple. Disney and Pixar are refusing calls from countries who want those scenes cut from the film. We'll leave you with that story. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Ollie Barrett. Do stay tuned to WION.
Disney Pixar's new Toy Story spin-off Lightyear won't play in at least 14 countries, where the film faces controversy over its depiction of a same-sex couple. Lightyear producer Galen Sussman told Reuters Monday that the film also might not be able to open in China, the world's largest movie market, after authorities there asked for cuts which Disney declined to make.
We haven't heard from China. I'm assuming that it will not make it through China. I know that we've gotten requests for things to cut. Disney isn't going to modify the material. We're not going to cut out anything, especially something as important as the loving and inspirational relationship that shows Buzz what he's missing by the choices that he's making.
One industry source told Reuters that China isn't a make-or-break market for Pixar, and ComScore data showed that Toy Story 4 only made 3% of its $1 billion box office there. In many of the countries which have outright banned Lightyear, homosexuality is considered criminal. The United Arab Emirates is one of them, claiming the film violates its media content standards for movies. Representatives of other countries which have banned the movie, including Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Lebanon, did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Actor Chris Evans, who voices lead character Buzz Lightyear, called the bans frustrating.
It's great that we're a part of something that's making steps forward in the social inclusion capacity, but it's frustrating that there are still places that aren't where they should be.
Lightyear makes its debut in the United States and Canada on Friday.
What is happening right now?
There are many other. This is right, Arab.